Okay.
Sorry, wrong hand gesture on that one.
Okay.
Trying to get the YouTube stream up and everything.
Alrighty.
There we go.
Okay.
All right, is everybody ready?
Yes.
I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Mm.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled to the same as provided by law of a schedule, including the date and time of this meeting. Due to the fact that we continue to meet through a remote meeting format, there are some required announcements to make. All participants are muted during this meeting. Anyone wishing to make comments may do so during comments from the public and during the public hearings on any ordinances by dialing *9 on your phones to raise your hand. And then once you are recognized, dialing *6 on your phones to unmute, or by raising your hand icon if you are on your computers. You must state your name and address for the record. Members of the public may also submit written comments to us for any future remote meetings by either email to Donna Jackson, Deputy Village Clerk, at djackson@ridgewoodnj.net with the subject line "Comments for Village Council Meeting," or a written letter to Donna Jackson, Deputy Village Clerk. Written comments must be received by 4 p.m. on the day before the remote meeting in order to be read into the record during the meeting. All written comments must adhere to the time limits already set by ordinance. Members of the public commenting during a remote meeting shall not act in any manner to disrupt the meeting. If anyone becomes disruptive during the meeting, they will be muted. If time permits, the disruptive individual shall be allowed to speak after all other members of the public are provided an opportunity to comment. Any continued disruption may result in the member being prevented from speaking during the remainder of this meeting. Disruptive conducts include, but are not limited to, shouting, interruption, and use of profanity. Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Perrin.
Here.
Councilwoman Reynolds.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Seaton.
Here.
Councilwoman Walsh.
Here.
And Mayor Newton is absent.
All right. Will you join me in flag salute? I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance
to
to the flag
to the United
of the
States
United
of
States
America,
of
America,
to the
and to
republic
the republic
and
for
which it stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice.
justice for all.
Now, if you join me in a moment of silence for all of our frontline workers and service persons. All right, thank you. All right, so we have the final budget meeting.
Right. So we have public comments first.
Right, let's open up public comments. Dylan, anyone?
I have nobody. Nobody's attending.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll close public comments. All right. Thank you, Heather. Now,
Okay.
on to the budget meeting.
So I'll hand it over to Bob. We're basically going to go over 3 areas and then discuss the various tax rates that are being proposed.
Okay.
Good evening. I sent you 5 documents on Friday and I had hard copy delivered to you this morning. Probably the easiest one to do first is the parking utility fund.
Okay.
We had talked about the appropriations at an early meeting,
You're cutting out, Bob.
revenues to support it.
We didn't hear that, Bob. Can you either get closer to your mic or something? We didn't hear what you said.
How about now? No?
Good.
Yeah, now it's good.
Okay. So this go around, you have the surplus to support the parking. So if you look at the parking meeting revenue for 2020, you'll see I'm about $700,000 short of what we anticipated for the year. Now, the state has allowed us to average last 3 years of revenue collections. So in the bottom left-hand corner, you see what those calculations are. And the average for those 3 years is approximately $1.6 million. So that's what I'm allowed to budget for this year. To compensate for the other shortfalls that I need, my operating surplus, I'm increasing to $477,000. and I'm using parking capital surplus of 400,000. Now, the overall budget is slightly down from last year, and that's the result of an offset of not having any surplus money I can send to the general fund amounting to $300,000, and an increase because of bond principal of $225,000. This is the first year we have to make payment on the bonds that we issued 2 years ago. Any questions on the parking?
I have a question. So, seeing that we're still in a pandemic and that there's going to be another year of probably negative revenue on the horizon, what are we doing in anticipation of that? We can't just kind of let it run again. Are we going to make any personnel changes? Are we going to do anything to, somebody posted on Facebook today that they've tried to use the kiosk 4 times and haven't been able to use it. I think the parking utility is of probably the biggest concern for me going forward. So I'm just curious what our plan is. I know we talked about it during the budget hearings, but it looks like we're hobbling ourselves a little bit with the parking utility with the pandemic.
We are. It's unfortunately, almost all of it is contractual of our appropriations. So I have to pay, I have lease arrangements on the kiosks. I have debt service that has to be paid. And we have parking enforcement officers that are part of what we pay through salaries and wages. And also it's an allocation of time included in here that management puts in. So for example, my time, Heather's time, anytime we deal, Dylan, with the parking utility, we're allowed to allocate our time to this. So there's sort of a benefit on that side.
Mm-hmm.
From the revenue side, I've stretched as much as I could to balance this out this year. One of the things that we may have to consider this year, which may also be in line with the study that was done a few years ago, and that is to increase the rates on parking. If you remember when we had Walker's report done, they gave us a schedule of when we should raise rates. The last one was done, I think at the end of last year, if I'm not mistaken, and we never really got the benefit of it because of the COVID. That is the only other side of bringing revenue into this other than the general fund supporting it. So, we're just going to have to keep an eye on how this moves forward. In regard to your question on the kiosk, we do have our PEOs monitor the kiosk. When they go out and they walk the town, they do test it. And when we find that there's one that may not be working, we notify Signal, they come out and do the repairs. I have almost 100 kiosks, so a couple down here and there is not to be unexpected, but we try to stay on top as much as we can to make certain that they're operational and they'll accept the money as they're supposed to.
Bob, is there any possibility at all that we could get some COVID relief money for this from, state or federal?
We did get, we were allowed to have an emergency with the state. We did this maybe about a month or 2 ago, where it became effective at the end of December to raise the shortfall for this revenue that we've experienced this year. So the impact of that will not be felt until 2022. But that's another process that the state has allowed us to do to sort of keep this balanced so as not to go to the general fund to have it paid off. So there is a vehicle in here that's been used this year.
You cut out on that last sentence or two.
I said we have utilized what the state is allowing us to do on this emergency to account for the shortfall in the revenues that we had this year.
Okay.
The impact of that will not be felt until 2022. when we'll have to start to raise that money in the parking utility to 1/5 of it to compensate for the shortfall this year.
I mean, I was
Bob?
hoping for more of a handout, shall we say, from the federal government, not
The unfortunate
no
part,
such thing.
the unfortunate part is that we're not allowed to utilize any money that potentially we could get from the state or federal government until it's received or until we have an award letter. So in dealing with FEMA and in dealing with CARES, it's only based upon what you get that you can use it. There's no award letters or promises to pay. So you're sort of held hostage until it comes through. So especially with FEMA is notorious for approximately a 2-year delay in paying back what you're entitled to. So hopefully by 2022, that money will be in-house and we'll be able to use it to offset some of these shortfalls.
Okay, thank you.
But I guess the question is, I don't think I mean, we have nobody parking, so how could we raise the rate to make it? I guess I'm trying to think ahead. If we know that we really can't raise the rate, nobody's parking.
Well, people are parking on the street. Nobody's parking in the garage.
Yeah, but the street is already, to just park for a couple of hours is, I mean.
It's a dilemma. There's no doubt about it. And when this process started with COVID, we all identified that it's a revenue problem, not an expense problem. So, hopefully by summertime we'll start getting more traction. People will start to go back into the city, and they'll start to utilize it. But other than that, I know of no other vehicle to compensate for any of these shortfalls other than to raise rates, and then you're passing it on to the population that's using it, not the potential.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because when we raised the rates, we did $1.25 in the streets and then $1 in the lots, but we're not going to have any kind of data because of everything that happened last year to really see whether or not that would be sufficient to carry all the expenses with the parking utility. So I kind of, I agree with Councilwoman Walsh that, raising the rates on the people who are coming in, I don't know. It's a dilemma. It's a tough situation to be in.
Heather, how many permits have we sold?
I'll check it and let you know, okay? Let me check it and I'll let you know.
Bob, we're down on interest on investments. What can you describe the investments?
Basically, we use a cash management program through the state. The reason for the shortfall last year was predominantly when we had the funds available from the garage, the capital, because capital interest comes to current as well. We were spending down on 12 million, and those rates were probably about 4.5% at the time. Once COVID hit, they dropped to less than 0.25. So they took a drastic turn, and that's what gave the shortfall. The amount that we are anticipating this year is consistent with what the cash management plan would offer and the cash that's available, in our projections.
Any other questions or discussion on parking? All right.
All right, the next one I'd like to talk about is the general fund revenues. So if you look down the 20 appropriation or budget versus realized, the right-hand column shows you all the deficiencies that resulted from COVID. So that number for local revenues is approximately $1.5 million of a shortfall. Now that shortfall is compensated for in the current year by the same emergency that council passed back in December to allow for a balance in operations so that the deficit doesn't take us down during the year. Now, with that being said, the amounts that I'm allowed to anticipate in 21 can be used, the 3-year average can also be used as I did in parking. So I also provided you with the anticipated revenues that are allowable in accordance with the local finance board, showing you the revenues that I am using an average for to offset that $1.5 million in the 21 budget. So as you move through the past local revenues, you'll see state aid is flat to last year, which is surprising, but it's been that number for like the last 5 years. But with the shortfall that the state had experienced, we thought we might take a hit on that, but we are not. And then when you get into other special items, there are 3 or 4 one-shots that I am using to balance the budget. One is the general capital fund balance. I have amount reserved for debt service that's accumulated over the past few years. And the offset to that is, you'll see I cannot bring in 300,000 from parking that I have done in the past. The only other change that will be made to this, at 44,200 on the last line, I just got some updated information that's going to go up to the 137. So that number will go up just a hair. But when all is said and done, I'm sorry, and last year as a result of how the property tax. Yes,
We didn't hear that.
After you said, when all is said and done, you
Right.
cut out.
sorry.
That's
Must be
okay.
satellites around here or bats, one or the other. I apologize. When all is said and done, the amount to be raised by taxation has increased by approximately, in this, it's reflected here, almost 5% over last year.
Oh, this is
On
where
revenue.
the NA was. What does NA mean on special items?
I'm sorry, what?
What does NA mean on the special items? Left-hand column?
Oh, those mean there's no state code for them?
Oh, okay.
You had asked about the FCOA. There's none listed for those. Any other questions on revenues?
Yeah, I do. I have a couple questions. So, and I guess this is maybe just a question to go back. So for recreation fees and permits, we're negative 235. But what's the corresponding, because we didn't run those programs, so there was no cost to us, correct? So where we would have gotten fees and permits, since we didn't run those programs, is that a wash enter, that line, but it's just not reflected here in terms of the revenue, or how is it
So
reflected in the parking or in the Parks and Rec?
many of the programs or events that occurred were run through Recreation Trust. So if we had money sitting in the trust and we wanted to run a program that we did not necessarily collect for in advance, we would run the expense through there. And then when the money came in, we would offset it there. So what you're seeing here is substantially, programs that just didn't exist. And that's the reason for the shortfall.
Okay. And then this is the one that's puzzling me. So our significant sewer dischargers, everybody's been home for a year. Everybody's been in hospitals for a year. How is that number a negative 123?
All right, so that I have to do.
There's lots of discharge that has been going on in this past year.
That I have to do a little research on, because I think the offset to that might be posted to, give me a sec, the sewer plant discharge acceptance. if you look at second to
I can't hear you.
it's showing a 90. I'm gonna have to get a megaphone.
Yeah.
How about now?
Yeah, you break up. That's the problem. You're breaking up.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we
All right.
didn't hear anything you said.
So-
No one too significant what?
So on the second to last page, under the other special items,
Okay.
Yeah.
the sewer plant discharge acceptance. I think some of that money might be in there. I haven't had an opportunity to sort through that yet, but that's showing a $93,000 excess.
Okay,
So I think some of that money belongs in the other line. I just haven't been able to filter that out yet.
okay, okay. And then, wait, there was one other question we had. No, I think that was it. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. On the second to last page, if I look at the sale of village property, is that movable property or real estate?
No, that's movable.
Okay.
So it may be
And-
equipment.
Like cars that were surplus and stuff?
Mhm.
Could be, yes.
And then on the last page, 07-192, what is that?
Oh,
Or has-
that's the library.
Oh, good.
Sorry.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I do. On Bob, on the 07-190 amount to be raised by taxation, does that include any of the new apartment buildings? And if so, which ones? And
So you get no benefit until the property is assessed. We had a partial assessment this year for the one up on Broad.
the date?
I-
No, that's not
Right,
the date.
no. What, well, the one that's
Yeah,
on Broad,
one up
anyway, there was a
Broad.
partial assessment on that.
Okay.
But the remainders, you will not get the benefit of this until October. So there's no vehicle you can use this year. Next year, you'll have a benefit because it'll be in the property valuation, but you get no benefit right now.
So even though people are living there, we won't get the
You
Yeah,
can
the
benefit?
only, at this
partial.
point, according to the tax assessor, Tony Rinaldi, he can only assess what's occupied. So if 40% is occupied as of a certain point in time, he can assess that. But it's not, every month he can do it. He's stuck in a time frame. So he did that as of, say, October of 2020, and that carried over this year. The next assessment or the next benefit of it will not be till October of 21.
That stinks. There's no way to do it any sooner?
No.
So, I'm sorry, Lorraine, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, sorry. So I actually saw somebody in the diner this weekend and they told me that they got a unit there and invited me over to come walk through it. She indicated that she got one of the last units, that the Dayton's full.
Again, I can't speak for Tony. There was a time frame as to when he could assess, and he did assess at that point in time. I believe it was October of 2020. So anything that's happened between October and now, even though someone's in there, you can't assess them till October. You will get the benefit of it in October for the time frame that they've occupied. That building's been occupied 100% or 90%, whatever. But there's nothing you can do in between.
So are you saying in October, we'll get them, if they moved in January 2021, we'll get the taxes starting January 2021, but we won't get it until October 2021?
you'll get an added assessment to the tax rolls, and it'll be effective going back to whenever they moved in, let's say. So if it was 100% in February, the end of February,
Yeah.
in October, you'll get an added assessment for that time frame from February till then, and those taxes are due and payable this year.
Okay.
But
But we
in
can't
this
get-
budget, in this budget, there's no vehicle to take advantage of that yet.
And
I
also,
thought that because it was new construction, that once they got the final CO, we were allowed to fully assess it. I thought that was New Jersey law.
So again, I can't speak for Tony
Yeah.
and the time frame, but I just know that there's certain stipulations as to when he can do what he does.
Yeah.
and Bob, you can't anticipate something in this year's budget that we didn't have in prior years. So would the same thing apply to taxes for these buildings, since they weren't done, and occupied in the prior year? We can't anticipate that revenue. So in October, when we do get the benefit of reassessing the properties, would that be kind of like an unanticipated added bonus that we would get maybe to help out with this year's budget, or certainly 2022's budget?
Well, what it'll do is it'll allow your increase the volume of the tax revenue that you're going to bring into the village in 2021. And then in 2022, it changes the base that you calculate your tax rate on. So your net valuations taxable will go up based upon the assessment that's levied for these new complexes that are being finalized. So that's when you get the benefit. It'll be in 2022.
Yeah, and Mike, to your question, if the rate's going to be set October 1st, then we have to put some sort of a reminder in our calendar that the Benjamin Franklin doesn't get their final October 10th. You know what I mean? Like, we have to make sure that that's not manipulated. If it's done, it's done. And the same thing with Chestnut Village, because if they don't get it assessed, if they miss that October 1st deadline, then it works in their favor and against us, because then they have the ability to wait another year.
So Tony is well aware of the need to get these properties assessed and on the tax rolls. I nudge him every month just to make sure that there isn't something else out there that we might miss. So he's pretty good, and I'll make sure we identify those dates that it gets done.
Great, thank you. Any other?
Yeah, Bob, on the first page, the special franchise tax with PSE&G, I can't remember if that was a credit. I remember us talking about it at a council meeting. And is that gone for good?
It's gone for good. What happened there was the state did an audit of the tax return of public service. Public service was taking a deduction for this franchise tax they were paying to us. They came in, they wanted documentation as to the legality of that payment. We only gave them what we had on file, which went back to like 1920. But we had nothing that identified anything current.
Breaking up
I'm
again.
sorry, I think my internet. How about now?
We can
No?
hear you now, but
Yeah, my
Can you
internet
take your
just.
video off, because sometimes when I have a slowdown, if I take my video off, we can hear you.
Me, you don't want to see this pretty face? I could try that.
It's sometimes if it's a strain on the internet, if you take the video off and just.
I'm going to take that personally.
You muted yourself, not the video. Okay, that's better.
How's that?
All right.
That's
Let's see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah, let's
So
try it.
going back to public service. So there's no documentation that this contribution is of a legal nature, because it goes back to like the 1920s. So the state disallowed their deduction. And since they disallowed it, they're not going to make it to us anymore. So that's gone.
That stinks.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
shame.
Yeah, I remember we had this discussion in a prior meeting. It came up that this was probably going to happen, but I don't think there was any kind of resolution until, I guess, recently.
Right.
Yeah, and the only possibility, which I haven't gotten any response yet, as to whether or not public service is appealing the decision. Because there may be other things in their disallowance that they feel are justified, and if they do, it's normally done as a package deal. So who knows? So, but I wouldn't, that's like a 2% possibility.
Don't count on it, is what you're saying.
Now you got it.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Anything else on revenues? Okay, so now I saved the best for last, and that's the proposed budget. So when we started the hearings with all the department heads and we took into consideration their requests, Heather and I made some modifications to their request to bring it down slightly. We were at over 10% of an increase from the prior year. So I took a first pass at, well, let me back up. So Village Council, when we started the hearings, had come up with some modifications, some changes that they wanted it to the village manager and a couple other places, which I took into consideration. I said, all right, well, let me see what I can do to get this to a 7% increase. So I went through and I looked at various departments. I went back through their budgets and I got it down to a 7% number. I then had a conversation with the mayor and Heather, and we decided that 7% is way out of line. Let's see what we can do to get it a little bit more friendly, so to speak. So I was able to get this down to 4.7% as a tax increase. And that is a result of moving some money around and utilizing trust funds that we have. Some positions are not going to be filled this year for requests, or they're going to be filled late. I reduced overtime in some cases to what was actually incurred last year. And I'm more than happy to go through this line by line if you want, or if you have questions on specific adjustments that I made. Every department head has been contacted. I've had conversations, or Steve and I have had conversations with them to let them know what the modifications are. They understand and they're willing to work with what we proposed. So back to you.
Okay, questions, comments?
So I'll just comment. I think there's no way we can approve a 4.7% budget this year. People are suffering. I don't, and we don't even know what the Board of Ed is going to do. I'm looking at all these numbers, and I think we have to, I personally believe we have to take another look through and try to get down around the 2% mark, 2%, 2.5. There's so many things in business going on right now. People are being laid off. There's the anticipation of people having to go back to work, and people don't want to necessarily be in the population unless they've been vaccinated. Companies are already making decisions, that are going to negatively impact people. And I just don't feel comfortable adding an extra tax burden of 4.7%. That's just my opinion.
Bob, I'm curious, do you know what the number is for that, whatever the current average value Ridgewood House, what that 4.7% would equate to in dollars?
Yes. So the tax on an average assessed value of $701,664 results in a $4,571 tax for municipal purposes, and that is approximately $213 higher than last year.
So the 4.7 equates to $213.
That's correct.
And that's about how much of our budget, how much of the whole package is that? Is that like what is it, 23%? And then the Board of Ed is like 66 or 67%.
That's correct. You're in the ballpark.
And we have no idea. Is the Board of Ed having their budget meetings concurrently with us, or are they behind us, or does anybody
Their
know?
budget is like July 1st, right?
Their fiscal year. So
Right.
they won't be doing this until as we get closer to April and May, just like we did last year.
Okay. So even if they go up 2%, so what does that, I wonder what that equates to on the balance of the 100%.
And the county's already
Okay.
indicated that they're increasing as well.
Did they say
Did
how
they
much?
say-
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
I could, I mean, obviously we can get it.
Bob, on page 14, we have total capital improvements of 475,000.
Pam, hold on 1 second. I think Bob was trying to figure out the number for the board.
Okay.
The Board of Ed went up 2%.
Give me 1 second, please. So 2%. No, I'm sorry, I don't have it. I thought I did. I apologize.
All right.
Bob, do you have any idea, I mean, even ballpark, how much additional you'd have to shave off the budget to get it down, say 2%, to get it down to like maybe 2.7?
Every 1/4% is worth approximately $90,000.
Okay,
So to get it down to a
360,
2.5 or something like that, we're talking,
360 or so.
well, more than that,
Yeah, that's only 1%.
$800,000.
Yeah, that's right, 4, so that's double that, so it'd be
720,
720,
right?
yeah.
That'll
So with
be.
that in
full
mind, this budget, the way it is right now, is not, it's only allowed, the only new hires, if I'm not mistaken, are 2 police and 2 fire. If we go that route to $800,000 or $720,000, we're going to have to chip away at personnel. I don't know where else to go. I have a lot of this is contractual. We had pension increases of 12% this year. Our debt service 12% increase. So those are things that you can't touch. So if you're going to go into the operating piece of it, I think you're looking at personnel,
Existing personnel.
existing personnel.
So that's pretty much, Bob, the only scenario that you have is that one, I guess. Anything else would be more, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I pared it down to what I think is bare bones.
Mhm.
Again, anything below this, we'd have to figure out where it's gonna come from as far as personnel or areas that I don't know. I don't know where else to look. I've tapped into my trust money. I brought in revenues that are on 3-year averages. There's a lot of things that we're stretched out on already.
I mean, my feeling is, although 4.7 sounds crazy, it's been many, many years since the budget went up that much. $213 on the average house, is less than $20 a month. I know we're gonna have Board of Ed on top of that, but I would be, we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we cut so much that, we're hurting services. We don't have enough police on the street. We've got a lot of new people moving in with the apartment buildings. You know, I wouldn't want to hurt us by cutting too much. It's a tough situation.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, the range of increase in municipalities around us, you know, a lot of them are at the 2.5%, 3.5%. They're feeling the impact of this as well.
Could we ask residents to collect and dispose of their own leaves? Would that save us some money?
I'd have no
Where-
idea. That's,
Yeah, I just don't know where they would dispose them. Dispose of them. We couldn't have them go to Lakeview
No.
because it's, you know, too much of a hazard to have all those cars going in there at once.
The capital improvements on page 14,
yes,
can those be put off at all?
no, that's the down payment on the capital ordinances. The capital budget that council approved the last pass has to have a 5% down payment, and this is where that money comes from.
Any other questions or comments?
Are furloughs out of the question?
They're not out of the question, but they probably wouldn't take place till June or July.
Because of civil service, we have requirements that have to be met before we can impose.
Right. It's a whole process. It's almost like a layoff process. And it takes about 120 to 160 days total. So we're you know, into the summer, I think. So, you know, you don't get a benefit. You get like maybe a half year, maybe less than a half year benefit.
And it's a lot of work to implement.
It is.
Almost
Because
not worth it.
You have to send, we have to send our plan to civil service. They then have to review it and decide whether or not they'll approve it. And then after that, it has to, you know, come back to us, and then we have to implement them. And if you're going to do furloughs, you're going to have to do it village-wide. So, you know, if you're going to exclude certain departments or divisions, you're not going to get the full savings. And actually, you just put it off for another year, right? Because next year you're back to where you are, you know.
So then Heather, what you're saying is, as opposed to a furlough, reducing personnel would be more effective.
Well, yeah, because then you're not paying and not replacing them, obviously. So then you're cutting into, in other words, we would not hire the 2 firemen, we would not hire the 2nd police officer, we would not hire any of the personnel that were cut or that were delayed. A couple of them, like 3, were delayed till November hire, which, you know, is not a lot of money. So yes, we'd have to do layoffs, and then that's again about 160 days. So again, you might get about half a year worth of savings for that.
Could we hire 1 police officer and 1 firefighter
We've
instead of
hired
2?
1 police officer is currently in the academy. We could hire 1 firefighter. But remember, part of the reason to hire the 2nd one was because of the paid EMTs during the day. So we've taken the money for paid EMTs out, and we're actually saving money. And I don't know if there'll be, you know, then we may incur overtime for the fire department if we don't have enough personnel to answer the ambulance calls.
So then where else can we make changes?
We're down to personnel, existing personnel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you'd have to go department by department, person by person, and really just try to add up a cumulative
would
total of like
save.
$700,000 worth of salaries and wages.
Right, exactly.
Well, and benefits, because that's included in there as well.
Correct. It would be.
But the problem with benefits is you still have a 12% increase. You won't realize that till next year.
No, but what she's saying, I think, was that if you started with the people that weren't hired first, and then, right, because we had not just those, wasn't there one for Dylan's department as well?
Right, and then 2 for Parks and Recreation. So it's
And
like,
then others.
that added up is maybe, what, Bob, maybe 150 or something? Because they're
Yeah.
low salaries. The salaries aren't that high. Maybe it's a little more, maybe it's
No,
200.
because the one for Dylan, the salary was like $70,000.
No, it's like, I think it's 50, close to 60. I don't think it was 70.
It was, I think it was like 65, because when I asked that question during the budget process, and you guys said that, there's Dylan, he can tell.
Dylan, what's the starting salary?
It was 60, but it was split with water.
Thank you.
All right, so it would only be 30.
30.
hmm
But that reduction is already taken into consideration here.
Correct.
So I mean, I guess at this point, what we could do is introduce the budget, and then at that point, the public would weigh in. And of course, we'd have a hearing, and the public would weigh in, and we could kind of gauge public opinion that way. Because I mean, this is the first time everybody's really hearing all these numbers.
Yeah, you're correct.
Unless, of course, everybody wants to go through the layoff process, and then that would be, it'd be a whole other process that we'd have to, start.
Right.
Like
And
now.
then keep in mind also that you do have unemployment expenses.
Right,
If you do layoffs. So you're not getting the full savings.
right.
What would be the cost of unemployment? Like 10%, 20%?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. So the one other catch, not it's a catch, it's just a reminder that once it reduces budget goes down to the state, it's subject to their review. Since this is a very unique year, they may have a lot of questions, or they may have suggested changes, but I'm just giving you a heads up that it's subject to their review and approval. And usually you don't get that answer until 2 or 3 days before we adopt it. So it's just one of those things.
When does the state have to receive it by?
They have to receive it, I think it's 10 days after 3 days after we introduce. And then they assign a reviewer, and then that reviewer usually has 20 other municipalities that may have the same due date that we do. So they try to work their way through it.
And then when does the budget have to be adopted by?
So if they come back, the budget right now is scheduled to be adopted on the 14th of April. Yes.
April.
So that's within the time frame that we have to do it. If the state comes back and asks for changes, then you amend that night, and then depending on what the changes are, you can adopt. If the changes are, if council suggests changes that exceed certain percentages of line items, then you have to have another hearing within 3 days of the day you adopt, and then you go through another process of advertisement and adoption.
This is like sitting at a funeral.
Well, we did have,
It's not good.
we did have 2 or 3 years of 0% increases and 2 or 3 years of 1.99% increases. And so unfortunately that comes back to haunt us. And the reality is it's not sustainable to do that. And it may not hit right away, but combined with, COVID combined with those in the past, and although it's quite a bit in the past, it took that long and COVID to catch up. And, unfortunately, this is where we are again, unless you want to, certainly we could, do away with the second police officer. Again, the second firefighter, we may pay in overtime. I mean, we have to keep that in mind. The other 3 individuals who are going to be hired in November, we can, get rid of that. But again, that'll amount to almost nothing. I mean, compared to what we need to get to, 720,000. It's going to be difficult. And again, keeping in mind that we have, I believe, 4 or 5 police officers who could walk out the door tomorrow and retire. And then
Yes.
also, we also have the multifamily housing, coming into being. And by the end of the year, probably most, if not all, will be occupied. Or, I don't know about fully occupied, but certainly occupied. And, that's something to keep in mind as well. So
I think we'd be hurting ourselves if we reduced the police officer by 1 and the fire department by 1. I don't want to consider, me personally, I think that's hurting our town in the future. I think it would be hard to come back it takes so long to get an officer on the street. If we're behind another year, it's going to be tough, and we're going to have a big influx of new people coming in. And if, Heather, what you said is accurate, that by hiring 2 firefighters and getting rid of the daytime
correct.
EMTs, if we're saving money, then we'd be crazy to not do that if it's saving us money.
Correct. This year we are saving money.
All right, so I mean, my suggestion would be to introduce this so we could start to hear back from the public. And, if we have to see if people are accepting of it or if there's major outcry and what that is. And I would say based on that, I mean, we'd have to take that information into consideration and move forward. It doesn't sound like anybody's, we're going to start, laying people off or looking into that right at the moment. So.
I mean, I think we need to consider everything. I think that with the unknown of the school district and the challenges that they've had this year, I don't anticipate them having and that's the lion's share. So they're gonna really get hit by them. And then if the increase is from us and the county, if our 213 is only
22 or 23%.
Right. So multiply that times 3. So there's going to be a 6. That's over that. It's going to be well over 1,000 on the average house. And if somebody's on unemployment, that's going to be a whole month's. It could be somebody's salary. There's lots of this, and like we just talked about, our parking revenue is not going to increase. We know we know that's not going to increase if the train station, and Heather's going to get the information from us, but it's like back in 2008, the data was there, but nobody looked at it. We know the data is that we know we're not going to have parking revenue. We're already into March and nobody's parking at the train. Nobody's parking in the lots. You can, get a parking spot on the street without a problem. I
think, the last couple of times I went into town, there was not a spot to be had on the street. I was happy to see it. I don't know if that's a daily occurrence, but the last couple of times I went in, there was not a spot to be had in the street.
Could we get the revenues to date for parking?
Sure. Sure, I can get that for you tomorrow.
Just to give us an idea, and then we'd have that coupled with how many spots we've sold in the, how many permit spots, just to, because then we can kind of back into it and know what our deficit's gonna be, and then if the deficit sounds like it's gonna be this number we were just talking about, then we have to find it somewhere.
Right.
This year.
I mean, I really think we need to try and find some creative solutions for the parking garage. Would people be interested in renting it for parking overnight? Are there enough college kids home from school? The parents are sick of having their the extra car in the driveway. They don't have room for it. I don't know. Are there people in the apartments that have an extra car that they would want to use the parking garage? I don't know. We got to throw some things out there to try and make some money off of it.
Or decrease our expenses. That was Pam's idea, that, if people had to deliver their leaves somewhere, whether they were bagged or, that's a tremendous savings, because that, we have to hire outside service for that. If we could, plan that, but that's going to be a shift in how Ridgewood has done its.
Right. I think you would get so much pushback from that, especially from.
We're in this together.
Yeah.
No, I understand that, but there's a lot of people that can't bag their own leaves. They're not physically capable of doing it. And, what do you, I don't know.
Grass clippings, to we have to put our heads together. We have to kind of figure the things that, the low hanging fruit of things that, maybe it's, you pick up the garbage only once a week. Maybe it's, those things will
That's right.
have an impact. And everybody can plan accordingly if they know they're only going to have it once a week and they're going to have recycling once a week.
Recycling once a month, maybe, instead of twice a month now.
Well, it is, what is it now?
It's twice a month recycling.
Every 2 weeks, yeah.
Because you can certainly bring it down yourself to the recycle center. So it's not like you wouldn't be picking up it at all. But if you encourage people to, try to bring as much down, like you said, we're all in it together. We could, make some significant changes so that we can, help them.
Can we figure out what the savings would be if we did recycling once a month? And I mean, I think garbage pickup in the summer really has to be twice a week. I think it would really smell if we did once a week.
There are some towns that do it from June through September, twice a week. And then all the rest is once a week. There are some towns that do it once a week year round.
Okay.
And if we made it just for this 1 year, pick up at the curb, do we save any money?
We might save on personnel if we went to street side, curbside pickup of garbage instead of rear yard.
We've talked about this for years, right, Mike? I mean, this has kind of been a conversation for years of, the rear yard, where some people would, kill for it and others say, I can drag it down to the street. So, I mean, maybe this is, with all due respect to everybody, maybe this is the year we have to try it.
Maybe it's the opportunity.
Yeah.
And then if you have a hardship, you can apply to the town.
Yeah.
But I mean, all these ideas are well and good, but I don't know that we could enact all of this stuff in the time frame that we have for the budget. Like, I definitely want to have these discussions, and I think we need to have these discussions this year going forward for next year's budget. But we're kind of in a crunch. I guess we have to introduce the budget at a certain time and to implement all of these changes, which are pretty significant changes. I don't know that we'd be able to do it to get all the information. I mean, unless I'm wrong, if we could get all the information and make all these changes to, you know, to the way we operate this year. But again, I don't know how that would delay the budget process, or, I mean, what would that entail?
It would delay it. We are supposed to introduce on Wednesday.
Mhm.
I mean, the latest we could introduce and still be within the time frame would be at a special meeting on March 24th, but still, that's not a lot of time either. And then, you know, we adopted a special meeting at the end of April. So, I mean, it doesn't give us a lot of time to get, and again, you have lead time, right? To be able to create ordinances to, you know, and to figure out how you would reroute routes to be able to do it. And so you don't get 9 months worth of savings. You'd get maybe half a year again, you know, and it might not start till July or August or September, you know. So again, I agree with the deputy mayor that I think these are conversations we should certainly have this year. Something that we should consider going forward. And but realistically, in order for us to get this budget done in the time frame required by statute, it's going to be difficult.
So I suggest council introduce Wednesday. You have options. If you want to amend down the road, you can, but at least we'll have an opportunity to get the state's feedback on any adjustments they may have. And I'm not saying they will, but I always like to let people know that that's a possibility. And during that time, we can see what other alternatives we want to pursue. But I think if you delay the introduction, you're not drawing a line in the sand. You're going to postpone this, and you don't want to run past what you're required to do. So I think if you do at least do Wednesday, you have options.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to be agile, and if it's going to take us to act quickly, we're going to have to act quickly. You know.
Is there an emergency procedure for passing ordinances instead of the 60 days?
No, it's not 60
30
days. It's what it is you have to advertise it, and there has to be at least 7 to 10 days until the hearing. And then with some ordinances, there are times in between introduction and adoption. So we'd have to look at, you know, how long that would take. But again, I mean, I think a minimum would be, and then it's 20 days from the date of adoption. So I mean, I think at the shortest, it might be 45 days. It might not be 60, but it might be 45 or 50. I'd have to actually look at it to figure it out.
No, I think you answered my question. The
It's
answer
pretty
is no.
close. It's pretty close.
And again, too, like if you were to say you were gonna do away with leaf collection, well, then you'd have to figure out, you can't just say, you know, willy-nilly, everybody can just bring their leaves down to Lakewood, because you don't know how many people will be showing up on the same day, or, you know, when, depending on when the leaves fall. So you would probably have to figure out some sort of schedule and time on, you know, what area of town and could go at what days, and how to coordinate that, and then make sure there's personnel there. So, I mean, there's, you know, on the back end, the operations end, there's a lot of additional planning and thought that would have to go into something like that, which would probably take you know, even more time than just doing the paperwork of passing ordinances and going through the motions that way. Like, to actually implement what you want to do would take planning and thought, because you wouldn't want it to be such a hurried, confused mess where, you know, it just turns into a disaster, and then everybody's, you know, even more upset, you know, then after they don't get their leaves picked up, and there's problems at the collection sites and things like that. So you really, you know, again, these are things we have to discuss, but, you know, given the time constraints, I don't know that, you know, I don't know we could do all these things quick enough to impact this budget.
Well, I mean, I would also just say that it's easier not to hire somebody than to furlough somebody or lay somebody off.
Mm,
So if we're anticipating hiring, I think it was like up to 6 people, correct, Heather? Including
no, it's one, it's 2 firefighters again, that's for the paid EMTs.
Mhm.
And then it's 1 additional police officer, which we hadn't anticipated originally. And then it's 3 other people who are gonna be hired in November. So that, it's 2 months worth of salary. And so what does that amount to, Bob, for
Yeah.
those 3 people? Maybe 50,000, maybe
Max
40,000,
50,000, more like 30.
30,000?
Wait,
Yes.
say that again. Oh, you're saying appropriated for 2021, but yeah, so then you'd have to go to either lay off or furlough.
It's the only other way, really. That's it. Because
Yeah.
I mean, the one employee, the firefighters, there's actually a savings considering the fact that they're taking over the paid AMTs, and that's less. So there's a savings there in hiring. Like Heather said before, if we don't hire them, then there could be overtime. So, we'll be right back to where we are basically with that. And then one of the other employees is split with the water department because a shared IT person. So really, you're just talking about a police officer and 2 other employees, but then they're not getting hired until November. So
November.
they're not, those numbers aren't really included in anything from now until November. So the only other way to do it is layoffs.
Layoffs.
That's it.
Let me ask a question. It's probably not a popular question, but so the library was going to get 1.4 million. I think they've already cut that in half to 700,000. Is there any way that, I mean, I don't know. They're not going to be getting a grant probably this year. I don't know when they're applying, but is there any way that some more of that money could be used this year and then we would look into next year,
So the
helping?
amount of operating money that the library gets from us is about $2.5 million. The cut that we made relates to their capital budget. So that's something we've dealt with already, and we took that into consideration for capital funding.
Oh, so you
This is
can't move it from capital to,
Correct,
okay.
correct.
And then there's the 5% down payment on capital, but that's the entire capital budget. So by taking out, a few $100,000 here and there only would reduce, be that same corresponding reduction in the 5% down payment. It would be much more than that.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, I'm back to my original suggestion that says, we had this meeting, we'll introduce the budget and on Wednesday, and then, next we'll hear from the public, I'm sure. And, again, we'll take that into consideration and see if we have to move to layoffs or not, I think, at that point.
I think that's fine. I mean, the problem is there anybody even watching this meeting or people,
No.
how do we get the word out?
There's
We
nobody.
send out a budget newsletter after introduction, goes to every single household.
Well, I know, but that's, in order for them to make public comment like on Wednesday.
Well, they have the opportunity though to comment at the public hearing too, and at any other meeting that they want to comment on. So between
I think
now
Lorraine
and,
is saying, how do we get the word out as to what's going on? Because there's 0 people on, maybe there's people watching at home, but to Mike's point, to get more people involved and hear their comments, we have to really push the message to them that we're struggling with making a decision and would really appreciate resident input.
I'm sure if
Oh.
we went on their Facebook page and said we're considering a 4.7% tax increase, then the comments will find us rather easily, I would
That
imagine.
is true.
Then maybe we should do it. I mean, we're gonna have to.
I would suggest that.
Yeah.
And post it on the website.
Yeah,
That way, that way. And again, if it's really going to be, if people are going to deal with this in such a bad light, and they're going to, be outraged or whatever they're going to be, I'm sure comments will beget comments and the word will spread rather quickly,
Yeah.
as things do I've seen information spread around the village pretty quickly sometimes. And this is probably something that would follow along that same path.
Yeah, I agree.
So we need an explanatory statement there, Bob, so that they understand, because I think anyone just seeing that number
Right.
is certainly going to be overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
But I think that if there's an explanation as to why, this is the amount that's being proposed, at least there'll be some kind of information out there in addition to just, this is the proposed increase.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to put stuff on Facebook without an explanation.
I
Well, yeah, I wouldn't suggest just putting that up because you'd generate, you don't know what kind of comments you would generate then, but we just kind of have to explain where we are, and, we're seeking comments and the public's input at this point.
Yeah.
So Wednesday night, Heather and I will be making a presentation on the budget overall, which we normally do on introduction.
Mhm.
There'll be information in there that can support where we are.
Mm.
Okay, then I think that would be, is there any other questions or comments? So we'll just do the introduction Wednesday and see what comes through.
And then,
Sorry.
people, like I said, people still have the opportunity to comment at any of our meetings
Right.
about the budget. It doesn't have to be just at a budget meeting.
Mhm.
And then April 14th would be the scheduled public hearing. Obviously, that's, there should be a lot of public comment then, I would assume. And then, it's up to the council at that point. to
so if we
decide.
make the introduction on Wednesday, and then, based on public comment, maybe in the next couple of meetings, if we want to change something, we're able to, but that would push the April 14th date further.
Right. So when we get to the night of the 14th, we can amend the budget to whatever we decide is necessary. You can do that before you get public comment. You can wait till after public comment. Either way, you have the power to make the amendment. And then depending on the amount of adjustments that are made and what lines are made, so to speak, determines whether or not we need to have another hearing on that amendment. So I'll send you, just so during the course of the next week or so, a breakdown of what the next steps are. So that way you'll know what the expectation would be.
Okay.
And then between Wednesday and April 14th, there's two additional work sessions for the council, correct?
Correct.
Then there's two additional meetings once, even after the introduction. So, maybe the word doesn't spread between now and Wednesday, maybe you get a few comments, but certainly after the budget introduction on Wednesday, we have two full meetings with a total of 4 public comment periods before we get to April 14th, which was, again, there's 2 more public comment periods and the public hearing on the budget. So I think that, between now and then, the public should have ample opportunity to comment, to send emails, to send letters, call Village Hall, or, whatever anybody would want to do to get their comments through.
Yeah, and then for Lorraine and Pam's benefit, you can open up those big books of yours, those big budget books, and go through and again, look at the things that we discussed. Maybe you made notes that you were on the fence of saying, yeah, and we can come back and maybe talk about some of that's what I intend to do is go look at my
But
notes.
all in the operating budget.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably have to cut the capital budget significantly to get, to impact the 5% down payment if you're just looking at the one area. So I think it would probably be best if you looked at the entirety of it. Maybe you look at some of the capital items too and figure, if you get a little bit out of that down payment, added on anything else that we all might be able to find, and that could get us closer. All right, is there anything else?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I need a
Thank you, Bob.
motion. We have public comments.
Oh, all right. Let's go back to public comment. Dylan, is there anybody there?
Nope.
Nobody there, so we didn't get the word out yet.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that there's not a single person
I
on.
know.
Yeah,
All the budget, yeah, it's like watching a movie and then walking out like 5 minutes before the end, like, forget it. We had all these long budget meetings, and there are people who sat through all these meetings, and then for the one where we're actually talking about the tax rate and like what's going to happen, nobody wants to see the end of the movie.
yeah, it's weird.
That's all right. Well, we'll have the sequel on Wednesday.
Yeah.
May I have a motion to
So
adjourn?
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Happy budgeting.
All right.
Right.